I have heard of it, but I could not tell you actually what it is.
I think it's the document that gives power from the monarch to Parliament.
Not really.
Not particularly, no.
Not really.
Very important if there's a pub and a restored copy of it.
I guess it's important because otherwise we live in a monarchy and not a democracy.
Again, I don't know enough about it to say if it's important or not.
In 1214, John wants to reclaim some lands in France, so he's taxing the barons really heavily for this. They eventually mount an army, they go over and fight the Battle of Bouvines in 1214, but we lost. So they have to come back, they've nothing to show for all the money they've been taxed. So the barons are getting really angry with John now, they really want rid of him. But they decide to give him one last chance. So they try and force out the document that eventually became known as Magna Carta out of him. And this was an attempt to limit the powers of the king. It was originally just for the benefit of the barons. It's only over the centuries the rights have filtered down to everybody else. But the original idea was to make the king subject to the law rather than above the law. Before Magna Carta, the king could do whatever he liked. He could say, you're guilty of something, and that's it, you're guilty of it. This was an attempt to the start of justice. They'd had the document annulled. John appealed to the Pope, and the Pope said, no, you and me run the country, because we were a Catholic country back then. So the first edition of the Magna Carta was annulled within 8 weeks. The barons are now getting really upset over this. Because they were originally French, some of them side with the French who wanted to attack England anyway. Because the barons are rebelling, they decided to reissue the Magna Carta straight away. There was a huge battle here called the Battle of Lincoln Fair in 1217. The French had taken the city of Lincoln, but because the castle was so well designed, as castles were, the French didn't get into the castle itself. So the castle is still loyal to the English. So they attack from the northwest. William Marshall leads the troops in from there. Because the castle is still loyal, the castle was being held then, the sheriff was Nicola de la Haye, so a really important woman in medieval times. And she lets in the English troops through the west gate, the far side there. She lets in the crossbow men, and they all come up on the walls. The French are all out in the city between here and the cathedral. The English are now coming in on two sides, what they always call the classic pincer movement. And the French are now sort of panicking, their leader's gone, they start retreating full tilt down the hill. English troops are now in full cry after them, the French troops are now in disarray. There was eventually another battle off the south coast at Sandwich where the French are also beaten, and so that the English crown stays safe with the English hands. Had it not been for the Battle of Lincoln. So his son Henry III now becomes the king. He's only a 9-year-old boy, but he was led by a very capable administrator called William Marshall, he's known as the Knight Who Saved England. Magna Carta was again reissued in 1225 when Henry was old enough to then authorise it himself. But there were at least 13 were sent out. Probably they would have gone round the cathedral cities because they would have had the people that could have read it because it was written in Latin. The one in Lincoln is the only one that actually has its destination written on the back. So 1847 this was built with the idea of it being used separate system, and the theory was solitary confinement 24 hours a day. They'd be in the cell perhaps 22 hours a day. They'd have an hour in the exercise yard where they were supposed to be sort of either separated. Until the 1860s, justice had to be seen to be done, so there were public hangings. And they reckon estimated crowds of 20,000 would come and watch a hanging. It just sowed the seeds of an idea that you could all be free, that the king couldn't just overrule everybody. So it's the idea that you had to play a part, really, So the democracy, because we all elect the people that we want, and it's the idea that everybody has the vote. You don't always get what you want, of course, but you will get the vote. An Oriental gentleman came in and stood in front of it and just burst into tears. He said it just means so much to everybody. It wasn't English, but just the idea just means so much to people.